look down at your shoes right now, or maybe you have a wallet in your pocket, or you're sitting on a car seat.
Right.
If any of those are made of leather, you are currently interacting with, well, basically a 50,000-year-old piece of biotechnology.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
You know, you are physically touching a stabilized dead body that ancient humans figured out how to, like, freeze in time. And they did it using wood smoke and animal brains, which is just wild.
It really is.
We tend to mentally toss leather into the same cozy textiles box as our cotton t-shirts and wool sweaters, just assuming it's another fabric choice for the winter.
But it's really not. I mean, a cotton shirt is just a plant spun into a geometric grid.
Exactly. Leather isn't woven. It's a material that breathes and stretches and scars and remembers. It's literally a biological organism whose decay was violently, intentionally interrupted.
It is the literal transformation of death into utility. So welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. We have this massive stack of research today, mostly based on a really fascinating file just titled leather.pdf.
Such a simple title for such a deep topic.
Right. And our mission today is to entirely deconstruct leather. We're going to explore how humanity's oldest survival mechanism evolved into this strategic resource that literally built empires.
Built empires and then became a cultural symbol of sheer rebellion.
Exactly. And ultimately, we'll get into how it sits at the center of an incredibly tense modern debate about ethics, plastics, and the environment.
So I want to start at the absolute beginning, because grouping leather with cotton, like we said, isn't just a simple miscategorization. It fundamentally misunderstands what the material is doing on a microscopic level.
Absolutely.
Like if I pull a loose thread on my sweater, the whole sleeve might unravel, right? Because it's a linear structure. But leather just doesn't behave like that.
No, it doesn't.
If you cut it, it doesn't fray. So why is that? What is actually happening inside a piece of leather that makes it so structurally invincible?
So to understand that, you really have to look at the anatomy of an animal's skin. Animal skin basically has three primary layers. You have the epidermis on the very outside.
That's the hair and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The thin layer containing hair and pigment. And then on the very inside, you have the hypodermis, which is mostly just fat and loose connective tissue.
Gotcha. So where's the leather?
Sandwiched right in the middle is the dermis. This dermis layer is what leather is actually made of, and it's composed almost entirely of a protein called collagen.
Okay, I hear the word collagen thrown around in skincare commercials all the time, you know, usually associated with, like, preventing wrinkles and anti-aging.
Right, yeah.
But what does it actually look like in the context of an animal hide?
Think of collagen as a biological rope. At the molecular level, collagen proteins wrap around each other in a triple helix.
A triple helix?
Yeah, like three strands twisting together to form a microscopic cable. And then these helices bundle together to form fibrils. And those fibrils bundle together to form massive fibers.
Oh, wow.
But here is the crucial difference between leather and, say, your cotton sweater. In a woven fabric, the threads run at right angles.
Right. Up, down, left, right.
Exactly. So when stress is applied, it travels along those straight lines. If one line snaps, the whole fabric fails.
It's just ripped straight across.
Yes. But in the animal dermis, those massive collagen fibers are not arranged in a grid at all. They are this chaotic, three-dimensional, deeply interwoven matrix. They loop and tangle in literally every possible direction.
So it's sort of more like a really dense 3D spider web.
That's a great way to picture it.
So if you poke a hole in it, the stress is just instantly distributed across like 1,000 other interwoven fibers pulling in entirely different directions.
Exactly. That non-uniform matrix gives the dermis unbelievable tear resistance, but it also gives it something else. Plasticity.
Plasticity, you mean like it acts like plastic?
Not quite. Plasticity is a material's ability to retain shape memory. So when you wear a heavy leather boot, the warmth and pressure of your foot slowly force those tangled collagen fibers to actually shift and relock into a new configuration.
Oh, so the boot is physically molding to your foot?
Precisely. A cotton canvas sneaker will never do that. It'll just stretch until it eventually tears.
That makes perfect sense for why it's such a durable material today. But, you know, let's jump back 50,000 years to the Upper Paleolithic period, Ice Age, Eurasia.
It was a brutal time.
Right. You have these early humans, Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens, living in environments where the climate is actively trying to kill them every single day.
Yeah, exposure was a constant threat.
So how did they figure this out? Because, I mean, if I leave a raw steak or a piece of chicken out on my kitchen counter, it starts smelling horrific within like 24 hours.
Oh, absolutely.
Bacteria just completely take over. So the leap from raw, rotting animal hide to durable, stabilized jacket seems impossibly vast.
The motivation was just sheer desperation, honestly. In an Ice Age environment, you either insulate your body or you die from exposure within hours.
Wow.
And they were already hunting these large mammals, mammoths, reindeer, bison, mostly for meat. The hides of these animals were incredibly thick and warm.
But like I said, raw skin rots.
It does, and it rots because of enzymes. Bacteria in the environment release these enzymes that act like microscopic scissors. They literally snip the peptide bonds that hold those beautiful collagen triple helices together.
So the ropes just fall apart.
Exactly. When those bonds are cut, the skin basically liquefies and decomposes.
So early humans had to somehow invent a way to stop microscopic bacterial scissors from cutting protein chains, tens of thousands of years before they even knew what a bacteria or a protein was.
Yeah, without a laboratory or any scientific tools.
How on earth did they manage that?
Through an intensely grueling, multi-generational process of tactile trial and error. So they first noticed that bacteria need water to survive.
Right, moisture.
Yeah. So if you stretch a rawhide out in the sun and scrape all the fat and flesh off it, it dries out.
Okay.
A dried hide becomes hard as a rock, what we call rawhide, and it stops rotting because the bacteria are just deprived of moisture.
But you can't wear a stiff board as a coat, right?
No, you really can't. It severely restricts your movement.
Right.
And the moment it rains,
Oh, the hide absorbs the water.
yep, the hide absorbs the water, the bacteria wake back up, and it starts rotting all over again.
Right, so rawhide buys you time, but it isn't leather. I mean, leather has to be soft, and it has to stay intact, even if it gets completely soaked.
Exactly.
So what was the breakthrough that actually stabilized the collagen permanently?
The breakthrough came from the environment itself, specifically fire and food. Early humans likely hung these dried hides inside their caves or their shelters where fires were constantly burning for warmth.
Oh, so they were getting smoked.
Yeah. They eventually realized that hides exposed to heavy wood smoke lasted much longer and resisted water way better.
Wait, why does smoke stop a hide from rotting? Is it just drying it out more?
No, there's actually a chemical reaction taking place. Wood smoke contains chemical compounds called aldehydes, specifically formaldehyde and glutaraldehyde.
Formaldehyde, like what
Right.
they use to preserve lab specimens.
Exactly the same stuff. When these aldehydes penetrate the dermis, they physically cross-link the collagen fibers. So imagine those collagen ropes we talked about earlier.
The 3D spider web.
Right. The aldehydes act like chemical bridges, binding the amino acids of one collagen rope directly to the amino acids of an adjacent rope.
Whoa.
Yeah, they literally glue the proteins together in a way that bacterial enzymes can no longer recognize or snip apart. The collagen is chemically locked.
That is staggering. They essentially discovered chemical cross-linking just through the byproduct of heating their caves.
It's an incredible piece of ancient innovation.
But earlier, I mentioned animal brains in the intro. You said they use smoke and brains to make this work. How do brains factor into this chemistry?
Well, smoke stabilizes the hide, but it doesn't make it soft. To make it soft enough to drape over a human body like clothing, you need lubrication.
Okay, because the smoke made it kind of stiff.
Right. Those cross-linked collagen fibers need to be able to slide past each other rather than sticking together. And animal brains are incredibly rich in emulsified fats and phospholipid oils, specifically something called lecithin.
Okay.
So the earliest tanners would actually take the brain of the animal they just killed, mash it into a paste, often mix it with a little warm water, and aggressively, physically rub it into the hide.
Oh, man. So you are taking a dead animal skin and manually rubbing its own brain matter deep into the pores just to keep yourself from freezing to death.
Precisely. It's
Yeah.
a very visceral process.
That is intense.
It is. But the lecithin in the brain acts as an extraordinary natural lubricant. It coats every individual collagen fiber in a microscopic layer of fat.
Right.
And once the fibers are coated, you physically stretch and pull the hide over a log or a bone tool while it dries.
To work the fibers loose?
Exactly. Because the fibers are lubricated, they don't glue themselves into a hard sheet. They remain separate and flexible. So you combine that brain lubrication with the aldehyde cross-linking from the smoke.
And you have achieved the first true leather.
Yes, it's soft, it's durable, and it absolutely will not rot.
It requires such an intimate, almost visceral relationship with the reality of the animal.
Oh, completely.
You're dealing with blood, brains, smoke, and muscle. It's really the ultimate zero-waste survival mechanism.
It truly was.
But Obviously, humanity didn't stay in caves making brain-tanned leather forever. As societies grew, the demand for leather exploded, right?
Massively.
We moved from small tribes needing winter coats to entire towns and cities needing shoes, harnesses, belts. So how did the chemistry evolve to handle that kind of scale?
Well, the scale forced a shift to what we call vegetable tanning. Instead of relying on brains and smoke, ancient and medieval civilizations figured out how to use the chemistry of plants.
Plants.
Yes. Specifically, they utilized plant polyphenols, which are commonly known as tannins.
Wait, tannins. I recognize that word from wine.
Yes.
It's what makes your mouth feel like super dry when you drink a really heavy red wine, right?
Exactly. That dry feeling in your mouth is called astringency. The tannins in the wine are actually binding to the proteins in your saliva, causing them to precipitate or clump together.
That's weirdly gross, but it makes sense.
Yeah, and that exact same chemical mechanism is what vegetable tanning leverages. Tanners would take thousands of pounds of tree bark, like oak, chestnut, or hemlock, crush it up, and steep it in massive vats of water.
To make like a giant bark tea?
Basically, yes.
Mm.
They'd create a highly concentrated tannin liquor. When you soak a prepared raw animal hide in this liquor, the tannins slowly penetrate the dermis.
Okay, and what are they doing in there?
They bind to the collagen fibers via hydrogen bonds, completely displacing the water molecules that were originally there.
So instead of an aldehyde bridge from the smoke, you're packing the space between the collagen fibers with heavy plant molecules.
Yes. The tannins essentially fill the voids in that biological matrix. This bulks up the leather, giving it a heavy, dense, firm structure.
Right.
And it also makes it highly resistant to bacteria because the bacteria cannot digest that tannin-soaked collagen.
But this process, I mean, it isn't fast, is it? From what I understand about vegetable tanning, it requires incredible patience.
Oh, it was excruciatingly slow. Vegetable tanning requires you to move the hides through a whole series of vats.
Like an assembly line?
Sort of, but very slow. You start with a very weak tannin solution and gradually move to highly concentrated ones over a period of weeks or sometimes up to a year.
A year. Why couldn't they just put it in the strong stuff right away?
Because if you put a raw hide into a strong tannin solution immediately, the outside of the hide tans so quickly that it creates a hard shell.
Oh, and that stops the rest from tanning.
Exactly. It prevents the tannins from reaching the center of the hide, so the center would remain raw and eventually just rot from the inside out.
Wow, so you're relying entirely on observation. There are no digital sensors telling you the tannin concentration.
None. It was pure craft and intuition.
And the preparation for this process sounds like an absolute nightmare. I mean, before you even put the hide in the tree bark soup, you have to get the hair off and clean the dermis.
Yes, the prep work was brutal.
How did medieval tanneries do that?
Well, this is where the romance of artisanal craft collides with some pretty grim historical reality. To loosen the hair follicles, tanners would soak the hides in alkaline solutions.
Okay.
Originally, they used wood ash or lime, but they also heavily relied on stale human urine.
Wait. Seriously?
Seriously. Stale urine breaks down into ammonia, which is a highly effective, naturally occurring alkaline substance. It causes the hair to just slip right out of the follicle.
So there were actually people whose job it was to collect stale human urine to fill massive vats for animal hides to soak in.
Absolutely. The urine trade was a legitimate economic sector in ancient cities like Rome. People would literally collect it from public latrines.
That is horrifying.
It gets worse. After the hair was removed, the hide was really stiff and swollen from the lime or the ammonia.
Okay, so how do you fix that?
To soften it, they employed a process called baiting. This involved soaking the hides in vats of warm water mixed with animal feces, most commonly pigeon or dog dung.
I'm almost afraid to ask, but how does dog dung soften an animal hide?
The feces contain powerful pancreatic enzymes left over from the animal's digestive tract. These enzymes actively digest the non-collagen proteins and the elastin fibers in the hide, breaking them down.
Oh, wow.
It's essentially a form of controlled putrefaction, and the tanner had to know exactly when to pull the hide out of the dung bath.
Let me guess. If you get it wrong, it's ruined.
Yep. If you pull it out too early, the leather is stiff. If you leave it in too long, the enzymes digest the collagen itself and the hide is completely ruined.
So you have workers knee-deep in vats of rotting flesh, human urine, dog feces, and crushed tree bark, relying entirely on their sense of smell and touch to know exactly when a chemical reaction is finished.
That sums it up.
The smell alone must have been apocalyptic.
The stench was legendary. Because of the overwhelming odor of decay, ammonia, and feces, Tanneries were almost universally banished to the outskirts of towns or placed downstream from the main population.
Right. Nobody wanted to live near that.
Exactly. In ancient Rome, the tanners, known as the coriari, were restricted to a specific district across the Tiber River, far away from the city center. In medieval Europe, they were pushed outside the city walls entirely.
Wow.
And the people who performed this vital labor were often socially marginalized. They were treated as impure or unapproachable because the stench of the tannery permanently seeped into their own skin.
This highlights such a fascinating contradiction. The laborers were treated as outcasts, but the material they produced was the absolute backbone of society.
Without a doubt.
I mean, without leather, the Roman Empire just doesn't exist, does it? We tend to think of Rome as bronze swords and marble columns, but the sheer logistics of moving an army required leather.
You cannot project military force across a continent without leather. A Roman legionary marched in boots called caligae.
Caligae.
Yes. These were heavy, vegetable-tanned leather boots studded with iron hobnails on the bottom for traction.
Like ancient cleats.
Exactly. If an army doesn't have durable footwear, the soldiers get blisters, their feet get infected, and the army just stops moving. Leather literally gave Rome its mobility.
That's incredible.
And it went way beyond footwear. A legionary shield was constructed of laminated wood covered in tightly stretched leather, which prevented the wood from splintering when struck by a sword.
I never knew that.
Yeah. And their tents, called papilio, were made of massive sheets of calfskin or goatskin.
Wait, leather tents? That must have weighed a ton.
They were incredibly heavy, yes. But yeah, I suppose it was the only material waterproof and windproof enough to keep an army dry in a harsh winter campaign.
Right, and keeping soldiers dry prevents disease.
Exactly, which historically kills far more soldiers than combat ever does. They used leather for saddles, for the harnesses of the supply mules, for the slings throwing lead projectiles.
So leather in the ancient world was really the equivalent of petroleum today.
That's a brilliant comparison. It was the strategic resource that powered the machinery of empire. The state that controlled the most efficient tanneries held a massive military advantage.
Okay, so we have this brutal, sensory-heavy, really slow process defining human progress for centuries.
Right.
But vegetable tanning, with its tree bark and year-long soaking times, just couldn't keep up with the Industrial Revolution.
No, it was way too slow for that.
By the 19th century, the population is booming, armies are larger, the demand for shoes and belts is skyrocketing. How did the industry speed up this ancient process?
They sped it up by abandoning plant chemistry entirely and turning to heavy metal chemistry.
Heavy metal.
Yeah. In the mid-19th century, the invention of chrome tanning completely upended the timeline of leather production. Instead of soaking hides in plant polyphenols for months, industrial tanners discovered they could soak hides in a solution of chromium third salts.
Chromium third salts. What does chromium do differently than the tree bark?
Well, chromium third ions are highly reactive. When introduced to the collagen matrix, they form these complex coordination bonds with the carboxyl groups of the collagen amino acids.
Okay, that sounds very technical.
Basically, instead of just filling the empty space like tannins do, the chromium ions create a tight, highly stable chemical cage completely around the collagen fibers.
Oh, interesting.
And the most revolutionary part, this chemical reaction happens incredibly fast. What used to take 6 months could now be completed in a single day.
Wait, from 6 months to 1 day?
Just 1 day.
That is an industrial miracle. I mean, it means you can mass-produce boots, jackets, belts, upholstery, all at a fraction of the cost.
It was an economic miracle, sure, but it represented a profound philosophical shift. Artisan leather making demanded that human beings constantly negotiate with the messy reality of biology, right?
Yeah, managing decay, observing the weather, feeling the hide.
Exactly. But chrome tanning allowed us to dominate the material. We introduced mechanical fleshing machines, massive rotating chemical drums, and standardized heavy metals.
Right, taking the biology out of it as much as possible.
But by solving the speed problem, we introduced a massive new issue: profound toxicity.
Because heavy metals don't just disappear when the leather is done.
No, they don't. Chromium III, the salt used in the tanning drums, is generally considered stable and safe under normal conditions.
Okay.
However, under certain conditions, such as poor pH management in the tannery, high heat, or exposure to certain oxidizing chemicals, Chromium the third can actually oxidize and convert into chromium-6.
Chromium-6. Wait, hexavalent chromium.
Yes, exactly.
That's a chemical from the Aaron Brockovich story, isn't it? The one poisoning the groundwater. Why is it so dangerous?
Hexavalent chromium is highly hazardous because it is a strong oxidizing agent. When it comes into contact with living tissue, it easily crosses cellular membranes.
Oh, wow.
And once it gets inside a human cell, it causes profound oxidative stress, actively damaging DNA and proteins. It is a known human carcinogen, strongly linked to lung and sinus cancers when inhaled, and severe allergic dermatitis when it comes into contact with the skin.
So we essentially traded a biological, the urine, the feces, the slow rot, for a chemical one.
That's exactly what happened.
We gained access to cheap, soft, standardized leather for the masses, but to get it, we injected a potential carcinogen into the manufacturing process.
A very dangerous trade-off.
And this really leads us to what our sources call ethical outsourcing. Because, I don't see massive chrome tanning facilities next to the luxury boutiques in Paris or New York.
No, you definitely do not.
Where is all this toxic chemistry actually happening today?
The modern vertical value chain of leather operates on a very harsh reality. The closer you are to the raw material and the messy, dangerous chemical transformation, the less power and money you have.
Right.
Today, the supply chain is deeply fragmented. The raw hides are harvested globally, often from mass agricultural centers, the Americas or Australia.
Okay, so the cows are there.
But the actual tanning process, the part that involves heavy water usage and the severe risk of chromium-6 exposure, is frequently outsourced to regions in the global south.
Places with lower labor costs, I imagine.
Significantly lower labor costs and, crucially, much weaker environmental regulations regarding wastewater treatment.
That is deeply cynical.
It really is.
We export the harm. We send the polluted wastewater and the occupational hazards to laborers in developing nations. And then we import the shiny, pristine, finished handbag or jacket to wealthy countries just to keep our own consciences clean.
That's the reality of the global supply chain.
The final consumer touches the leather and feels luxury, but they are entirely disconnected from the chemical reality of how it was made.
It's a deliberate distancing. The system is intentionally designed to keep you from thinking about that chain of events. When you buy a high-end leather good, you are capturing the aesthetic value of the material without having to shoulder any of the environmental or human cost of its stabilization.
Which, makes me wonder how leather evolved into a fashion statement in the first place.
It's a fascinating leap.
For thousands of years, as we've discussed, leather was purely utilitarian. It was a soldier's boot, a horse's saddle, a blacksmith's apron. It was armor and infrastructure.
Yep.
So if its origins are tied to slaughter, toxic chemistry, and marginalized labor, how did a leather jacket become the ultimate symbol of cool? How did we get from Roman supply chains to the fashion runway?
The transition from pure utility to cultural symbol happened dramatically in the 20th century, and it was specifically driven by aviation and warfare.
Oh, really? Not fashion designers?
Not initially, no. During World War I and World War II, combat pilots were flying at incredibly high altitudes in unpressurized, unheated cockpits. The temperature drops well below freezing up there.
Okay, so it's a survival situation again.
Exactly. To survive, the military issued heavy leather flight jackets, like the famous American A2 or G1 jackets.
Oh yeah, the bomber jackets.
Right. They used leather because it was the only material dense enough to cut the freezing wind while still remaining flexible enough for the pilot to actually operate the aircraft.
So once again, leather is acting as a literal survival mechanism against a hostile environment, just like it was in the Ice Age.
It's the exact same fundamental use case. But here's where the culture shifts. After the wars, these pilots returned home. And many of them really struggled to reintegrate into polite civilian society.
Sure, after experiencing that kind of combat.
Right. So they kept wearing their military flight jackets as they rode motorcycles across the country. Suddenly, this thick, protective material was no longer just a symbol of state-sponsored warfare.
It became something else.
It was being repurposed by disenfranchised youth.
They weaponized the material.
Precisely.
You see this so vividly in pop culture. I mean, think about Marlon Brando in The Wild One, sitting on a motorcycle in that black leather jacket, exuding pure defiance.
James Dean.
Right, James Dean. And then later, it evolves into the punk rock movement, with the Ramones in their shot perfecto jackets.
The heavy metal scene, the BDSM community.
Exactly. These subcultures took a material that historically meant authority and military logistics, and they used it to signal sexual agency, danger, and controlled aggression.
They were essentially saying, I am wearing armor. You cannot control me.
That is the psychological brilliance of it. The jacket acts as an armor against the physical elements, yes. But more importantly, it serves as armor against societal norms.
It's a very powerful statement. But the true paradox of leather is its extreme ambiguity.
What do you mean?
Well, while punks were using cheap, stiff leather to signal rebellion, minimalist European luxury houses were using meticulously crafted, flawless calfskin to signal the exact opposite.
Oh, right. Like a brand like Hermes uses leather to communicate wealth without noise.
Yes, it's an assertion of aristocracy, of equestrian culture, refinement, and high status.
The material itself is kind of like a blank canvas for human intention.
It really is. I mean, a distressed motorcycle jacket and a pristine leather-bound Bible cover are made of the exact same biological material, a stabilized collagen matrix from a cow's dermis.
But they speak entirely different cultural dialect.
Exactly. One snarls at society, and the other solemnly clears its throat.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. I think of putting on a leather jacket as slipping into an emotional prosthetic.
An emotional prosthetic, I like that.
Because if you work in middle management, you drive a hybrid sedan, you spend your days looking at spreadsheets, putting on a heavy, creaking leather jacket allows you to instantly borrow the grit of a biker or the daring of a WWII aviator.
You are borrowing a narrative that you haven't actually lived.
Exactly.
Emotional prosthetic captures it perfectly. You are consuming an aesthetic of resilience. But modern consumers are starting to feel a deep friction regarding this consumption.
Yeah, the guilt is setting in.
Right. We want the narrative, we want the aesthetic, but we are becoming increasingly uncomfortable with where the material actually comes from.
Which brings us to the ethical tightrope of the 21st century.
It does.
This is where the debate gets incredibly heated, you know? We have people who love the durability and heritage of leather, and people who are fiercely opposed to it because of the animal origins and the environmental impact.
It's a very polarized space right now.
And our goal here isn't to declare a winner, but to objectively map out the landscape based on our sources. So what is the fundamental argument from the pro-leather camp?
The pro-leather argument hinges on the concept of circularity and waste valorization.
Waste valorization.
Yeah.
Making waste valuable.
Exactly. The reality of global agriculture is that humanity consumes massive amounts of beef and dairy. Cattle are primarily raised for those food industries, not for their skin. The hide is a byproduct.
Okay, so they're saying the cow is already dead for the meat.
Right. And if the tanning industry did not exist to purchase those hides, millions of tons of raw, putrescible animal skin would be sent to landfills every single year.
And as we discussed earlier, rotting hides are an environmental disaster.
Oh, huge. They decompose and release massive amounts of methane, which is a greenhouse gas vastly more potent than carbon dioxide.
So the tanners argue that they are actually performing a necessary public service. They are taking a massive biological waste stream and locking it into a durable, useful product that can last for generations.
Yeah, that is their core defense.
Yeah.
However, the anti-leather argument completely rejects the premise that hides are merely a harmless byproduct.
What's their counter-argument?
They focus on the concept of inseparability. When you purchase a leather jacket or a leather couch, you are adding economic value to the hide. That value goes back to the slaughterhouse and the cattle rancher.
I see. So buying leather financially subsidizes the animal agriculture industry.
Precisely. Even if the cow wasn't killed solely for its leather, the revenue from the leather makes the entire operation more profitable.
So you can't really separate the two.
Critics point out that the cattle industry is a leading driver of global deforestation, particularly in places like the Amazon basin, where forests are cleared just for grazing land.
Plus the immense water usage.
Yes, and the baseline methane emissions from the cattle themselves. They argue that you simply cannot divorce the leather from the systemic environmental and ethical consequences of raising the animal.
I mean, I understand both sides of that argument. The friction makes total sense.
It's a complex issue.
But what frustrates me deeply is how the market has responded to consumer guilt. Because the immediate reaction has been this massive explosion of vegan leather.
Ah, yes. Vegan leather.
You walk into a store, you see a tag that says vegan leather, and you feel this wave of relief. You think, great, I get the cool aesthetic of a leather jacket, but no animals were harmed and I'm saving the planet.
That's exactly what they want you to think.
But when you actually dig into what that material is, it's incredibly deceptive, isn't it?
It is a masterclass in marketing misdirection. The term vegan leather heavily implies a natural, plant-based alternative.
Right, you hear vegan, you think plants.
But in the vast majority of commercial applications, vegan leather is simply polyurethane, known as PU, or polyvinyl chloride, PVC.
It's plastic.
It is entirely plastic.
So we are replacing a biological material with fossil fuel.
Yeah, exactly. To create a standard vegan leather jacket, manufacturers take a thin layer of woven polyester fabric and basically bond a layer of liquid polyurethane plastic to the top of it.
And then just stamp it with a fake green pattern to mimic animal pores.
Yep. This relies entirely on petroleum extraction. Furthermore, polyurethane is not breathable, it does not stretch and mold to your body like collagen does, and most critically, it does not age well.
Oh, it ages terribly. Anyone who has owned a cheap faux leather chair knows exactly what happens.
It's inevitable.
After a year or two, the plastic layer just starts to delaminate from the fabric backing. It cracks, it peels, and it starts shedding little flakes of plastic everywhere.
And those flakes are microplastics. As the jacket or chair breaks down, it sheds microplastics right into your home and the environment.
Which is awful.
And when that vegan leather jacket inevitably looks terrible after 2 years, what do? You throw it away.
Because you can't fix it.
Right. Because it is a complex composite of plastic and synthetic fabric, it cannot be recycled. It goes straight to a landfill, where the polyurethane will sit for centuries, slowly breaking down into smaller and smaller toxic microparticles.
This is where I just struggle with the ethics of it all. If a consumer buys a plastic jacket that falls apart in 2 years and ends up polluting a landfill for a millennium, is that truly a more ethical choice than buying a well-made, vegetable-tanned leather boot that lasts for 30 years?
It's a very fair question to ask.
Real leather can be conditioned, it can be resoled, the stitching can be repaired, a piece of plastic cannot be repaired. Once it peels, it's garbage.
It raises a vital question about the life cycle of our goods. Now, to be fair to innovation, the material science industry recognizes this problem.
Are they making better alternatives?
We are seeing the emergence of biohybrids. These are materials made from cactus fibers, apple waste from the juice industry, or mushroom mycelium.
Oh, I've heard of mushroom leather. That sounds promising.
These are exciting developments.
Sure.
But the brutal little truth that many companies hide is that to give those plant fibers the tensile strength and flexibility of animal collagen, they often still have to mix them with synthetic polymer binders.
So there's still plastic in it.
Usually, yes. They are better than pure polyurethane, for sure. But they cannot yet match the sheer structural integrity, repairability, and longevity of genuine leather.
So if a consumer is listening to this and they want to make an actually ethical choice regarding the clothes they wear and the bags they carry, what is the real hierarchy of decision-making? What should they actually do?
The most pragmatic approach involves looking at the intended lifespan of the object. If you are purchasing an item designed for rigorous, long-term, use-heavy work boots, saddlery, a briefcase, a protective motorcycle jacket.
Things you plan to keep forever.
Right. In those cases, investing in high-quality, traceable, real leather is highly defensible. The environmental cost of producing that leather is amortized over decades of use, especially if you maintain and repair it.
And what about fast fashion?
Using genuine leather for throwaway. Trendy fast fashion items like shoes you will wear for one season, or a cheaply constructed jacket you will discard next year is an absolute abuse of the material.
Our sources refer to it as wasted nobility, don't they?
Yes.
Wasted nobility. You're taking a material that requires immense biological sacrifice and chemical resources to produce, and you are treating it as disposable.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
Ultimately, the most sustainable choice a consumer can make is the one nobody in the fashion industry actually wants to hear.
Which is?
Buy less. Buy high-quality used items, and maintain and repair what you already own.
Buy less. Yeah, wasted nobility. That phrase just carries so much weight. It really forces you to look at your closet and ask if you are genuinely investing in longevity or if you are just consuming the trendy aesthetic of sustainability.
It's an uncomfortable mirror.
Which perfectly leads us into the final and perhaps most profound section of our deep dive, the philosophical core of leather.
Yes, this is where the source material gets incredibly interesting.
Because beyond the chemistry and the supply chains, this material seems to resonate with something incredibly deep in human psychology, doesn't it?
It does. Our source material introduces a fascinating psychological framework here, centering around an archetype they call Devon.
Devon. What does that represent?
In this framework, the Devon archetype represents a specific kind of human journey. It is about resilience, the integration of one's shadow or darker aspects, and achieving a kind of redemption through strict discipline and enduring hardship.
And leather is basically the physical embodiment of that archetype.
Exactly.
I mean, think about the life cycle of a piece of leather. It begins as something living, totally vulnerable to the elements. During its life, the animal gets scraped by barbed wire, maybe bitten by insects. It develops stretch marks and wrinkles.
And all of that biological history is mapped directly onto the dermis.
Right. Then the animal dies, and the hide undergoes this brutal, painful transformation we talked about.
It is scraped, soaked in harsh chemicals, stretched, pounded.
But it emerges on the other side stabilized. It is made beautiful and indestructible precisely because it has endured that process.
It forces us to confront massive underlying human tensions. The tension between permanence and decay, the tension between beauty and violence. A piece of synthetic plastic is born perfect in a factory. But the moment you scratch a plastic vegan leather jacket, it is ruined. It begins its immediate decline into garbage.
It has no ability to recover.
None. But leather behaves entirely differently. When high-quality leather gets scratched, or exposed to rain, or absorbs the oils from your hands over years of use, it doesn't degrade, it patinates.
It integrates the damage. It literally takes past trauma, the scratches, the wear, the sun exposure, and turns it into functional strength and aesthetic depth.
Exactly.
It is a material that physically records the life of the wearer without breaking down. It's profound to think that a jacket can represent redemption in that way.
If we pull back and look at the grand philosophical takeaway of human history with leather, it proves that humans are not just passive inhabitants of this planet. We are fundamentally transformers.
We intervene.
We do. We look at the natural cycle of life, death, and rapid decay, and we refuse to let it happen on nature's terms. We interrupt decay with human intention.
We take the finality of death and we force it back into continuity and utility.
Decay interrupted by intention. That is what leather is.
But you know, while we are brilliant at transformation, our modern system reveals a really deep psychological shadow.
Yes, the distancing we talked about earlier.
Right. We want the transformation, but we want to remain entirely innocent of the violence required to achieve it.
We want the beautiful, tough, enduring leather jacket, but we refuse to smell the tannery.
We don't want to see the worker in Bangladesh handling the chromium salts.
And we absolutely do not want to confront the reality of the slaughterhouse. The progress of the Industrial Revolution hasn't actually removed the moral cost of making leather. It has simply obscured it behind shiny storefronts and clever marketing.
Man, we've gone on quite the journey today. I mean, we started 50,000 years ago with freezing early humans, desperately rubbing animal brains into rawhides just to survive the Ice Age.
A long way from the luxury boutique.
Seriously. And then we moved through the foul-smelling vats of ancient Rome, building empires on the backs of marginalized laborers.
We tracked the industrial shift to heavy metal chemistry.
The weaponization of jackets by punk rockers, and finally the modern consumer holding a plastic bag, just trying to navigate this massive maze of ethical greenwashing.
It is a dizzying evolution.
Yeah.
But through it all, the material itself, that chaotic, dense, beautiful network of collagen fibers, remains a mirror.
A mirror.
Yeah. It reflects exactly what the society using it values at that moment. Survival, empire, rebellion, or convenience.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, what is the final thought we can leave our listener with? Something for them to mull over the next time they put on their shoes or grab their wallet?
I think the deepest question leather asks us is one of justification. Is turning death into utility actually morally justified, or is it merely economically efficient? The next time you put on a piece of leather, you are directly benefiting from an ancient, violent, and incredible chemical transformation. So ask yourself, are you honoring the life of the animal, the grueling labor of the tanner, and the deep history of the material by using that item well and keeping it for decades?
Or are you simply consuming it as a disposable prop to borrow an identity you haven't actually earned?
Exactly.
Wow. That is going to fundamentally change how I look at my own closet. Thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material today. We really hope it encourages you to look a little closer at the tags on your clothes, to understand the chemistry of the objects you touch every day.
And to appreciate the hidden histories hanging quietly in your closet.
Absolutely. Because the next time you reach for that favorite jacket, you aren't just grabbing a textile, you're wrapping yourself in an interrupted decay. Until next time, stay curious.